Join us. We'll be your friends.
But you can never leave.
Is veganism a cult?
Hi, I'm NISHA.
I'm Nicole.
I'm DANI.
And I'm Hannah. And this is
The Vegan View.
Cheers! So we've all heard it before. Veganism, CrossFit, paleo, it's a cult. But what makes a cult really a cult? So I was listening to this podcast. It's by the Jonathan Van Ness from Queer Eye, and it's called Getting Curious with Jonathan Van Ness. And he did this podcast with Natalie Feinblatt called What Makes a Cult a Cult? And I thought it would be really interesting, since people say like a lot of group things are cult-like, to really break down like what makes a cult and how it compares with veganism, and kind of talk about how we can make veganism not as scary and not as cult-like. So we have a little list. Someone who does a lot of work with cult psychology, there's like a bunch of lists. People have their own qualifications, but this is Andy Naselli's list. So if you want to look it up yourself, Google that. So I'm going to talk about the 6 characteristics of a cult. Do you guys know anything really about cults?
There's Kool-Aid involved.
Yeah, don't drink the Kool-Aid.
They all drank that stuff thinking that it was going to get them like closer to
yeah, and they ended up dying. So like with a lot of cults are these groups that like end up either ruining people's lives if they leave them, or there's like mass suicides, murders.
So have you guys ever been accused of being in a vegan cult?
I feel like when you've been vegan long enough, you start hearing everything in the book about vegans. Oh, why are you eating the cow's foods if you love it so much? Like all that type of stuff. You hear everything. So cults, I'm sure I've heard it, but I can't think of a specific time.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's ever outright said you're in a cult because you're vegan, but I do get like little comments that kind of lead me to think that they might feel that way, especially whenever I'm like going out to eat with non-vegans or things like that. I'll find that people are extra defensive, and they'll be like, well, you can eat vegan, but I'm not going to, like, don't try to like change me kind of thing. To me, I'm like, I'm not trying to convert you.
Yeah.
Or I've had family members that are like, don't try to convert me, and I'm like, I'm not trying to convert you to anything. Like this isn't like something you convert to.
What's really funny is that when I was listening to this podcast, one of the key components is that there's an exclusiveness and like a keeping others out of feeling with a cult. And I thought that's probably the most tangible reason
why people say
that people, because veganism looks to an outsider like it's something you can't do yourself.
Also, I think vegans tend to be really passionate. Like I changed my Instagram name to Nikki Vegan, and like I wear vegan shirts all the time, and I like talking about it. I make YouTube videos, you know, all the time about it. And I think my friends who knew me before are like, okay, cool, she's just not gonna eat animals. And now it's like, I'm vegan, and they're kind of like, oh, okay, that's like a lot. Like when I was gluten-free, I didn't wear like no gluten shirts, you know? So I think they're kind of like, oh, like that's it seems a little extreme, especially since they tend to focus on everything that you're not eating, and then you get so passionate about it. It's like, how does that happen? So I can see why people say that.
Right. What I think is really funny and different about our channel is that we don't talk about veganism as like there can only be one kind of vegan. You can only there be. So with cults, there's a level of exclusivity that they think that being a part of whatever organization, group, religion, that they're alone in the thinking of that. And I was like, oh my gosh, how many times have you ever felt like, we were just talking about it, like no one understands us?
Oh, always. Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I feel like, especially when I first went vegan, I didn't know any other vegans, and I felt very, very isolated because the only person I had was my boyfriend, who was also vegan with me, but we didn't have any friends, no family members, nothing, and it is a very isolating feeling. So I feel for you guys, especially those of you that comment and say you don't have any vegan friends around you. I mean, YouTube really became a space for me to kind of like feel like I had people who understood me. I think that the longer you're vegan, the more your friends and family understand it, and the less isolating it is. Like now I feel like people are accepting of it. They know it's not just like, even though I'll occasionally get comments like, oh, I wish you could eat this. And I'm like, no, I can. I choose not to.
Yes.
But they're getting it.
Yeah. So another quality for most cults, and which is a huge thing that veganism is not like, is that there's usually a charismatic leader or thought behind it. Veganism isn't a religion. It's not following anyone. You don't have to repent.
And it's not organized around like one central figure, which a lot of these types of cults are. Like it's just as simple as not wanting to inflict harm on animals or your body or the environment. And there's no like kind of central unit that goes around it. I mean, there's so many different kinds of vegans who eat in very different ways and have different lifestyles and different beliefs. The only thing that is unifying is just that they don't eat animals.
Yeah.
But in a cult, it's like there's so much more about this one particular person, this one leader.
Yeah. To me, it's just like, as simple as like most people believe in equal rights for all humans, and vegans just believe in equal rights for animals, and we just apply that to our lives. You don't have to change your religion to be vegan. You don't have to change your job to be vegan. You can still be the same person that you are and just make more mindful decisions, and that's what it is at the end of the day.
And what I've learned and read about cults, I mean, I'll admit my knowledge of cults is not that great.
That's good.
Yeah, that's a good thing. I mean, I was in a cult like 3 years ago, but I got out, so.
You're reformed.
No, I don't know a ton, but what I can say, I feel with confidence, is that they seem to follow a specific strict type of life. And I know people think that veganism is restrictive and strict and not flexible, but the truth is there are so many different ways that you can be vegan, and it doesn't have to be one specific thing. It's not you only cook at home and eat salads. It's, you know, you can, there's different ways to be vegan, different types of vegans, and I think that in itself shows that veganism isn't a cult, it's just a lifestyle. It's a way that you choose to live, and a way that you choose to spend your money so that it supports things that you can proudly say that you support.
As a vegan, you can still be a fashionista. You can still do things like hosting television. You can have any job you want. You can still be very enthusiastic about food and creating amazing recipes, and you don't have to change who you are as a person to follow having vegan ideals. Whereas with a cult, you have to change everything about yourself in order to fit a certain mold for fear of a certain leader or the community. The fourth characteristic of a cult is this constant fear of being disowned. So if you violate certain terms in a cult, you can be excommunicated, you can lose all your family and friends, you can lose job opportunities, just like the whole life you knew. And I know a lot of ex-vegans would probably say they felt very attacked, but there's one key point that I think is different with a cult. So what do you guys have experience with being feel excommunicated ever from being the vegan community?
I love that one because I think that this was what kept me from saying that I was vegan for a very long time, was that once you come out and say that you're vegan, there's all these other expectations of you. And that's not to say that every vegan expects every other vegan to be perfect, but from what it appears online sometimes when you see comments where people are picking out little things that you've done wrong, that you're not a perfect vegan, that can make you feel like if I come out and say that I'm vegan, I'm now putting myself at risk for people to now put me under a microscope and examine everything we said. And we talk about this all the time on the show. We have a whole episode, Not Vegan Enough, where we get more into that. I can see why the outside world might feel that way, but as a vegan who has fellow vegan friends who are very understanding, that being called a vegan does not mean you're a perfect person. It just means you're not eating animal products and you're not using them in your daily life, and that's all that it means.
Yeah, I think the vegan community, there's been a lot of either diets or trends with what you wear, what you put on your body, what you clean your house with, that a lot of people will follow, and if you do anything different,
they say you're not a
people
vegan.
Get really mad, and you just can never be vegan enough. And when I think about that, I'm you're making veganism a cult.
Right.
You're not making it a social justice movement.
I feel like if you go back on it, I can see why why
it's daunting.
Yeah, I feel like it's different than being in a cult though, because it's in a cult, it's if you change your mind, then you're completely excommunicated from everyone, and if you decide not to be vegan after being vegan, you're still...
No one cares.
Yeah, I mean, you might get some criticism, but since when does that really matter? I mean,
so that,
you know what I mean?
I love that you brought that up, because that's the major key difference. There's no threat, there's no life, threatening things.
Yeah.
You don't lose your whole life if you don't go vegan. You may get some criticism, as Nicole is saying, but there's not that binding like sacrificial component to it. Do you ever receive criticism, or you're scared like you're not going to be perfect enough?
Yeah, well, we were talking earlier. I eat healthy when I'm cooking at home, but also I'm always on the road. I'm waking up early and working late and doing a bunch of stuff, so sometimes I will have to go drive through places like Taco Bell or go to Chipotle, and I know that I've been a lot of the times afraid to talk about that on my social media, because there is this expectation of, you know, veganism is like, you have to be a healthy vegan, you have to be high carb, low fat, or whatever.
You have to eat smoothie bowls only.
Yeah, smoothie bowls only, or like oats are everything, or whatever it is, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I don't follow a lot of that because, like I said before, I go at veganism with a completely ethical
Standpoint.
a completely ethical standpoint. So for me to like indulge in Taco Bell or like an 18-inch Whole Foods vegan pizza, which I did 2 days ago, like that's fine with me. But I get afraid of the criticism that I'll receive for not being healthy enough.
Right.
I think that's why it's important to like speak out about it, you know, like I love that we can talk about that on this channel and just say that like it's okay if you're not perfect. That doesn't make you any less of a vegan. Like, you know, I think who's to say that you're not a vegan just because you did one thing that they didn't feel like was vegan enough?
Right.
I have my friend, you guys probably know him, Marco Antonio Rahil. We had a conversation about this recently where we were talking about how you do the best you can when you're vegan. Nobody's ever going to be perfect. There's
Veganism,
always,
yeah.
so you do what you can with the resources that you have available to you. And if you can be vegan all the time, but buying, you know, secondhand clothing or ethically produced clothing is not possible, then just do what you can.
Yeah.
Veganism is about practicing when practicable, when able to be practiced, and possible. It's not about being perfect.
Right.
You're not being held to these standards. And that brings me to the last point, is that in a cult, there's a threat of some kind of attack. That's because cults really center their organizations around confession and getting valuable, sensitive information from you and using that against you in case you leave. And that is totally not what veganism is. That's the main thing that determines a cult. And have you guys ever felt threatened by being vegan? No.
No, if anything, I feel like
Safer.
the vegan community is so welcoming, so safe, so friendly. I just remember my first vegan event was a vegan festival, and I just remember looking around at the people and being like, wow, these people are so happy. Like, they love life. They have such a joy for life. And that's not to say every vegan is, but for the most part, I've never felt like this community was out to get me or anything like that.
I think that vegans are enlightened and compassionate.
Yeah.
And I think those are two important factors, you know, just to be a good human.
Yeah.
I think a really good thing to keep in mind is that I think all the qualities that make a cult, like these threats, these sensitive information, this threat of excommunication and isolation, are things you have control over. Everyone knows, like, there's some vegan person online who's always attacking you and trying to make you feel like you're a part of this crazy, scary organization.
And you don't identify with that at all.
Yeah. So by like coming at people with open arms and accepting people's flaws and shortcomings, I think that's going to really change the face of veganism. Humans are social, and a lot of social groups will have cult-like characteristics. Sororities, workout classes, yoga, some religions, like they're kind of communal gatherings. So of course you're going to have a community, a sense of exclusivity, but you're not going to be in a constant threat. And if you're feeling that way, you should change your social circle.
And I think words really do matter, especially now since so much of our lives are online and we are in contact with like the written word a lot more than we were. I think that the word cult is a really serious thing. Obviously, it has a lot of really serious and scary connotations, and I think people should be maybe a little careful throwing that word around, especially when I think if you just dig a little deeper into the vegan community and see why people are so passionate and excited about it and wearing it on their shirts, you'll see that it's because they all feel like their lives have really changed for the better, and it really does kind of bleed out into other parts of their lives and makes them more compassionate, more aware, more thoughtful overall. So once you start to see that, I think it would probably make it seem a little less strange.
Yes.
And I loved in the podcast I mentioned earlier, they really talk about how it's very insensitive to throw around that word, because there are so many people who have PTSD and lifelong repercussions from being in a cult. And when you say like, oh, CrossFit's a cult, paleo's a cult, veganism is a cult, you're really making light of these survivors' lives, and it's not nice. Don't do it. So veganism is not a cult. That's enough of that.
Thank you so much for watching, everybody. We want to know, what do you do to make veganism seem less like a cult? Tell us right down there in the comment section. Let's have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
Let's make veganism not seem like a cult, because it's not a cult. It's not a cult at all. Don't forget to check out their YouTube channels, all such great YouTubers, and check out my Instagram. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next time on The Vegan View.
Yeah.
Bye.